because of KFBK. But if you're talking about also providing some statewide, service, typically, Bob, how many stories a day will you file?
Two. Generally two, and two versions of each story. Right. And whereas if you're centralized at the Capitol, you can do 4 or 5 stories. I'm not going to say easier, but it's at least geographically you're centralized. And where at KFBK we end up doing, we'll have a shooting up in North Highlands, and then we have something going on at the Capitol, and then if something else breaks late in the day, then we may end up going somewhere else. So minimum 2, just because we have a top of the hour and the bottom of the hour, and so we have a different story for each one, and we have 4 hours to cover. So we'll do 2. I try to do 3 different versions of a story every day, and that kind of allows us to deal with that time crunch that we have. I can put in different facts in each version, so I can end up taking a minute and a half or 2 minutes to actually tell the story, but I can only do it in 45-second bites every hour.
You're reporting based on a cell phone, or do you use a hard line going back to the station?
Generally, we use, if we're doing a live report, we'll either use a cell phone or we'll use what's called an RPU unit, and it's just basically, it's like a miniaturized vision of a television live truck. Just with the audio signal being sent to a receiver, which is then transmitted to the station, or the station picks it up directly. And so it's sort of like a CB in a way, and we can play sound interviews that we have, and we have a microphone set up, and so we generally, if we're going live, we do use that technology, or we use a cell phone.
I understand. Marianne, who decides what goes on the air?
Well, the final arbiter, as far as editorial decisions, is the news director of the station. But
everybody's got one?
Most stations have one, although KFBK didn't always. They didn't for a while.
We didn't for a while. We lost one, and our program director ended up being news director and program director for a long while.
But the news director is the fellow that you named the frog after when you won the frog jumping contest.
He named the frog, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Gordon Jump, the winner of the media division. I believe Marianne Rust was a close second.
I was. We had Nina Todenberg. That was, after Nina Todenberg.
Right.
Yes, she didn't do as well.
And I suspect I suspect that endeared you to the news director.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he named the frog, and then the frog won. So he's been boasting with pride, and while others have been green with envy. Sorry.
Bob, you couldn't resist, could you?
I had to make the leap.
Tell me what makes politics exciting for you all, and Marianne, you were talking about you kind of felt like this is where you ought to be. What makes politics exciting for you?
Well, it's really exciting to be a political reporter because you have access to people such as yourself who are policymakers, decision makers. You're the leaders elected by the people, and we get the honor and the privilege of being able to talk with you, of being able to then report to people who, the average person out there doesn't have that kind of access. And so I really look at it as a duty, an honor to be able to report this information that otherwise people wouldn't really have. And I love it when you walk down the hall to go to the Assembly or the Senate chambers. There's all the lobbyists lining the hallway, and they can't go in, but we can.
You can.
I have to admit it. It's a nice feeling to feel that, and the more you cover, the longer you cover, the more people you know, and it's a great privilege.
Bob, we have less than a minute left, and unfortunately, we probably should have booked this for a couple-hour session because you all have just been terrific. You ever had anybody say no to you? I'm not going to talk to you about that. Go away, get away, stay away.
At the Capitol, yeah. The things is occasionally a lawmaker will get caught with they're trying to sell you a bill of goods and it's not what it seems, and they're trying to do something behind closed doors, and we uncover it, and yeah, they don't really want to talk about that. So it happens. It's rare. Usually lawmakers, their hearts are in the right place. They're just sometimes take the wrong road to get there.
My guess is that gets the hair up on the back of your neck too if somebody says no, right?
It does.
Sure.
It's automatic. There's no reason to not talk to us because we're just people. We just happen to have a microphone.
I understand. Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne and Bob, for your time. When we come back, we'll be joined by radio veterans Phil Cowan and Ari Graswitz to talk about the changing world of radio. Welcome back. We're now joined with Ari Graswitz of KFBK and KOVR and Phil Cowan, former host of the Paul and Phil Show. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I mean, this is quite a role reversal. I was talking to you yesterday, Ari, and talking about an interesting issue to me, and now here we are today talking about radio and how things are changing, and thank you all for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to see you.
My pleasure, and have at it. Ask anything you want. Go ahead. This is your shot.
Ask Ari a lot of personal questions.
Anything you want.
You know, let me be Ari. Now you made the transition from newspaper to radio. You have any regrets?
None. You know, my only regret was I didn't do it sooner. I wasted 35 years of my life at the Sacramento Bee, and I wish I would have gotten out of there 15 years ago. So I'm having a great time. It's absolutely, and it's not a move that I would have ever made had it not been for the fact that newspapers are finished. They're in the toilet, and they don't know how to get out of that problem. And so I moved over to the broadcast media and have not looked back.
Let's talk about how radio has changed, though, when we take a look at the current situation, Phil.
Well, I think increasingly, and I fear that I may come off sounding like a bitter guy because I'm no longer in the business, but believe me, I have felt this way about the industry for the last several years. It is no longer being operated by broadcasters or entertainers. It's being operated by market speculators. And I think it's been to the detriment of the medium. I really do. The great advantage that radio had as a medium was that it was live and it was local and it was immediate. And increasingly, it's neither live nor local. There's very little local radio on anymore. Ari and Kitty do the afternoon show. There's the morning news block on KFBK. And KFBK has an evening talk show with Bruce Mayman that's locally based. That's about it in this market now.
But that's true across the nation, is it not?
Largely, yes. There are still a few places. I really think that there are a couple of companies. CBS has the great advantage, CBS Radio, of being part of a much larger corporation. At Clear Channel, which is the company I work for and that RE works for, it really is, even though they do outdoor and some other things, it's the bulk of their business. And as big a proponent, and you and I have talked about this many times over the years, you know I'm a big proponent of capitalism and the free market. I really think Clear Channel is one of the companies that embodies a lot of what is bad about capitalism.
But is it the internet? Is it the explosion of the blogs that has changed radio?
It has to some degree. I mean, especially on the music side, it's made a huge difference because people are just getting their music differently than they used to because of the internet and because of MP3 players that they carry around everywhere. But on the news side, I think what has changed it more than anything else is simple corporate greed. A former general manager of mine that Bob and I were just talking about outside, we had lunch not long ago, and he said, back in the day, as the kids say, when we had worked together, he said, if as a market manager you were doing a 15% profit margin, they loved you. And if you could deliver 20, you were a hero. Now, if you can't deliver a 50% profit margin, your neck's on the block.
Well, and the other problem is, as you alluded to, it used to be 20 years ago, there might have been 25 stations in Sacramento, and 20 of them were locally owned. And now there are 2 of them that are locally owned, and everything else is owned by a couple of companies. Yep. And if those companies are great, that's wonderful. If they're generous, that's wonderful. If they're committed to local broadcasting, that's terrific. If they're not, tough luck.